righty.
Okay, here we are. Well, it's an absolute pleasure today to have with me Dean Drake from UMBC. I've known Dean perhaps 23 years, something like that.
2001.
2001. It's flown, right?
It has.
And we both look very different than we did in 2001.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
A few extra chins.
The wife complains about him all the time, right? The wife complains about him all the time. A lot older, but I'd like to think a little bit wiser. As
Yes, I hope so.
And what I want to talk to you about today, as we've discussed, is the new book we're putting together. The title of the book is You've Got Time, So Use It, referring to the fact that most 9-month faculty have time and will have to consult new companies. And the subtitle of the book is How Professors Can Be Entrepreneurs from Within an Academic Setting. And as you can appreciate in your role at UMBC, that's not so easy.
No.
The path to success for companies actually is hard being a professor. So starting off today, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your title and role within UMBC, what you do.
So, my title, I'm not a real big person on titles. I'm the Associate Vice President for Research. I report to Carl Steiner, who's the VP. The office is now the Division of Research and Creative Achievement. My role is really to help 4 main groups within our office. And so there's 5. There's the Office of Research Development, so they make the connections between outside entities and UMBC capabilities. Don Engel and Carl kind of deal with that. The rest of the office deals with the Office of Sponsored Programs, so they handle all the proposals and awards, the Office of Technology Development, which we'll talk a little bit about today, as well as the Office of Research Protections and Compliance, which kind of ties in when you talk about conflicts of interest and conflicts of commitment and those types of things. I think it'll tie in nicely to the topic today. And also Research Administrative Systems, which is the systems that we use for research administration. You know, Kowali is the system that we utilize. So those 4 offices, I kind of help them do their jobs in supporting the faculty in research and creative achievement.
Okay, thank you. What I want to talk to you about today is, you kind of alluded to them really, is the entrepreneurial aspect of what faculty, staff and students can be involved with. And how would you describe how your office actually helps entrepreneurial activities with faculty on campus?
Yeah, I think, you know, we have a lot of different programs, a lot of innovative programs, and it's not just one group. As you say, it takes a village, and so we collaborate a lot across multiple areas. So we were one of the first to come up with what's called an express license. The express license allows faculty to license the technology that's developed while they're working at UMBC in a very efficient way, so that the license is non-negotiable. And you can go the negotiated route if you want, but this express license is quick. It gets it done, it's set, it's been very successful. I think we have, Wendy can probably give you the exact, I think it's 10, maybe even 20 of those that we've executed so far. We also have different funding mechanisms. We have the Technology Catalyst Fund. That fund has been around for 6 years now. It's been very, very helpful for faculty. I think you've gotten a couple of them as well. We just started a new program, and I'm going to have to look at my notes here. It's the Faculty Entrepreneurship Accelerator Fund. We call it FEAT, F-E-A-T. And FEAT is unique in ways that are, whenever you look at funding always has a date, right? It's November 1, July 1. This is when these proposals are due. FEAT is very dynamic. So we developed it to be the ability to have small tranches of money whenever a faculty needs it. So we had a faculty member who needed a marketing survey done for an MII. We'll talk about the TEDCO MII program as well. But it was $2,000. They just needed money to get this marketing program done so they could get an MII award. And so FEAT was perfect for that. We gave them the money, they got the marketing survey done, they won the MII. So these programs that we have, and there's multiple other programs out there that we have available, are geared towards supporting faculty in those areas. We have the startup company meeting, the roundtable that we have on a regular basis. We recognize faculty for their inventions. We have inventorship awards and those types of things. So, you know, a lot of it is providing that support and that justification, but also a lot of it is outreach and awareness and setting up those collaborations with faculty who have gone through it. Like you had mentioned earlier to me that you were helping out other faculty who are new to the game. That's great. That's amazing that you're doing that. I think in a general sense, Wendy Martin, who's the director of our Office of Technology Development, and Carl and I agreed that the Office of Technology Development really isn't out there to make money. Making money is certainly good, don't get me wrong. But the ultimate goal, most of our technology and our intellectual property is developed using state and federal tax dollars. So what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is really to get that technology out to society. So how do we partner? How do we partner with our faculty? How do we partner with industry to get that technology that you guys are creating out to society? And that's the goal. And so everything based off of that is based off of those that main goal.
I want to jump back to the express license. We kind of talked about a lot of things there all in one, but let's go back to the express license.
Sure.
The express license, I think, has success, but I think the success in the express license lies in a different area. I have a different spin myself on it. Being a recipient of one, I actually have an express license for Licet.
Right.
A company I formed, spun out from UMBC in 2016. What I like about the express license is it's actually not that favorable in terms to the company. It's not egregious, but it's not that favorable in terms. It would be a lot better to negotiate the terms with the university. But the problem is, and this is where I think the express license really works, is that how does a faculty member negotiate with its employer? Right?
You've got to get in a lawyer.
You've got to get in a lawyer, you've got a CEO, and then you've got to spend the money.
Yep.
But you're a startup company, so how do you do that in the first place?
Exactly.
And I think the express license, again, not so favorable terms, but not egregious, removes that dichotomy and problem of having to negotiate. Now, I would have no problem negotiating with Wendy. I've negotiated with Wendy many things, mostly about returning patents back to me and how much I've got to pay her for them, but that's a different story that I'll talk to Wendy about next week. But I think the express license, and I think UMBC has been very successful with that. I think it has been a very successful mechanism to alleviate conflict or potential conflict between a faculty member and the university.
We weren't certainly the first university to do it. We were one of the first, and we were actually nationally recognized for implementing that express license and some of the other things that Wendy's implemented in our tech transfer office. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. It's that value there of not having to pay for an attorney or someone else to help negotiate that is immeasurable.
Certainly the patent license negotiations I've been involved with in the UMBC, other universities, other entities, companies that I've helped, have often taken many, many months. The express license also saves a lot of time. It's a no frills, this is the terms, it's non-negotiable, put your signature on it if you're happy, get this back to me in a week.
Yeah. And then it's yours.
And it's yours. And I think it's great.
Yeah, and you know, one of the nice things when you start talking about programs like what the state and we were actually, the University System of Maryland was very influential in getting the MII, the TEDCO MII program initiated and started. And you know, that program was developed 2015, 2016 timeframe. And it's I mean, the startups that we had during that time frame were increased. We had, it was like 5 or 6 years, we had 25 startups in that time period. So we went from 4 to 5 a year, from 1 to 2 a year to 4 to 5 a year. And it was just an incredible jump. And it's because of the things like express license that allowed us to get the technology out, MII programs that required a license of the technology, and then moving that stuff forward and the funding that provided. It's been, and let's not forget Dave Fink and our site miners, who have been just amazing in their ability to meet with the faculty and help guide them through this process. Because let's face it, every faculty member is an entrepreneur. When you think about it, right? An entrepreneur is someone who recognizes a problem and tries to solve it, right? And so, what do you do in your lab every day as a faculty member? You're recognizing problems and you're trying to solve them. And so, and you're running a lab. A lab is kind of like a small little company. And so, in many ways, there's a transition there that I think is ingrained in faculty who are running labs. And but it's a challenge. There's a lot of work to it, but it's there.
I like the way you described a few moments ago of describing this village of support with these boxes of support that you provide for faculty. Of course, they're more recent at UMBC. You go back 10, 15 years, a lot of these programs that didn't exist. I became familiar with the FEAT program. I'm actually a recipient of FEAT recently.
Yes, you are.
And which I think is an amazing program, filling that void of getting that little extra bit of data to be able to then license something or form a company or et cetera, et cetera. I think that's an amazing program that builds on this village concept of entrepreneurialism within UMBC. I think having our own entrepreneur in residence, Dave Fink, is fantastic. Many an hour, me and Dave have sat talking about concepts, and not just my businesses, but other faculty members, about how we could help them with something in particular move forward. So having him there, I think he's been an asset to UMBC in this area for the same reason.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you're right. I mean, it's a village. We have the BW Tech Park, which the last time I had heard, about 100 faculty had relationships with that park in some way. Those kinds of things, and of course our relationship with the University System of Maryland and some of the things, and you have TEDCO and MIPS. So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of a village. There's other people out there helping and programs, and the system is geared towards it. They're promoting it. We were pushing back in 2014, 2015 timeframe to implement, make sure that entrepreneurship was part of the P&T process. Not all departments have implemented it yet, but making sure that when a faculty is being measured, that they include entrepreneurship in their entrepreneurial activities.
And you mentioned that, and it's only recently, I'm going to say in the last 5 years, that what's known as the Faculty Annual Reports, the FAR, the electronic online system where all faculty have to submit this. And this usually occurs in May of every year for tenured faculty and tenure track faculty. And it's only in the last few years that there's actually a section to upload new disclosures, patents, etc.
Yeah.
So I kudos
to the long process.
Kudos to the university for actually recognizing that. And I can tell you that on the tenure promotion committees that I sit on, as a full professor, I get to sit on all in chemistry.
Right.
I can tell you that it is part of the process. We recognize the value, the intensity of time, effort it takes to actually do an invention disclosure and then move it downfield, move that process downfield, which is it's very laborious for faculty, as well as the university cost-wise, to file, to get these guys actually issued and get these patents moved. I want to talk to you briefly. So we've talked about all the fun things, the great things, and certainly a lot of successes our institution has seen over the years in entrepreneurialism. And they've primarily applied to faculty, but what about the undergraduate students? How you kind of talk about from an institutional perspective?
Yeah, I really, and this kind of falls with Carl and Down, and I think Freeman and Valerie is the same way. You can't have research without your undergraduate and graduate students.
Absolutely.
You just can't. And so promoting that and promoting those relationships is critical. We have the ERCAD, which is the undergraduate research program, where undergraduates present with in real life their research, and they have the posters up and everything. It's a big day.
And many of them have never done it before. So
yeah, exactly. And part of the challenge there is, you're taking your technology mind and you're trying to condense it, all the research that you've done over years or whatever, into one poster. And you're trying to make it concise, and you're trying to make it, for the general public to be able to understand. And that's a skill that needs to be developed. And so doing it at an undergraduate level is part of what we're trying to do. One of the other things that we all agreed on in our office is that economic development and entrepreneurship and economic development and how we, as a university, share that and do that is not just through startups. It's not just through the intellectual property. You're publishing. So you're taking your technology, your knowledge, and your skills, and you're showing that to the public so that people can take that and move it forward. And you're also teaching and educating the students. That's another way that we're developing that technology and moving it forward. And so there's multiple ways that we're entrepreneurial in our academic settings.
This is a difficult one, but what about students forming companies at the undergraduate level?
That's a challenge, and it's a challenge because students are not employees, right? So there's their time frame that they're going to be with the university is very short. So how do you invest in a student when their time frame is short? And certainly when a student has a relationship with a faculty member and that is that's one thing. If a student does something on their own, outside the university, there are resources that we can help them with, but we're normally not going after a patent protection for that kind of stuff because it's so short-lived. The student is off someplace else in 4 years. You know how long it takes technology to move forward. There's just no, it doesn't make sense to do a lot of that. Now, we do some of it, but it is a challenge for students in their intellectual property and submitting applications for intellectual property.
Countless undergraduate students over the years I've spoke to about their ideas for companies and doing it, and I've had to say the same thing, it's very difficult. There are different models. Over the years I've been helping Northwestern, they have a program up there that enables undergraduates to go into technology incubators on campus, solely dedicated to propagating technology that developed within the university and then forming companies within the university.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a very cool program that they have. I don't recall the name of the actual program, but it's interesting. I've never seen it before, what they've done, but a lot of money has gone into that to be able to do something like that. They have a dedicated building and dedicated people helping them.
We have a lot of, we have the Alex Brown Center for Entrepreneurship. We were one of the few universities in the country, and actually we're touted at many USM Board of Regents meetings because we incorporated entrepreneurship into the curriculum. Multiple programs, but entrepreneurial students can actually go in to add some courses to their regular curriculum in chemistry, biochemistry, whatever, and can have that entrepreneurial minor and get some support for some of their startups. Okamoka is a UMBC startup from students that went through that same program. So. Yeah, there are resources out there. I'd love to hear more about the Northwestern. So
I'll
talk to Wendy about it. Yeah, please do.
The interesting thing about the Alex Brown as well is that they actually provide funding for faculty to take a course that they actually teach and add an entrepreneurial spin to it. And I think that's wonderful. I've never done that myself. I've never had the bandwidth to be able to do that, but I know faculty that have and are currently doing it, and they say it's a wonderful opportunity. It's not a lot of money. It just bridges a gap in the summer for the faculty to address their courses, and I think that's also an attractive way of introducing entrepreneurialism to faculty and getting a way in for early faculty as well to be able to think about entrepreneurialism.
That's a really good point. It's double-sided, right? It's not just bringing the students up, but it's educating and bringing the faculty into it as well.
And I like it as a first step. But many faculty I've encouraged to go and do those small steps before they start the big steps.
Yes.
We talked about the village concept earlier and all the great things we're doing at UMBC for entrepreneurialism. I'd like to talk about the bad things here now. And the bad things are the funny things. And what I mean by this is things that faculty should pay attention to, be careful of, watch the minefields, things that where faculty can come undone in this process. And I'm talking to Wendy shortly, and one of them, of course, is patent protection. That you're not understanding the patent process, the protection process, and how that can really leave a patent not patentable, for example.
Yeah.
But what about from an administration perspective, from your office's perspective, the things that faculty need to be really cautious of from an early stage as they're moving forward?
You know, the biggest thing that we have challenges with is where a faculty wants to publish something and it's not protected. And so, you know, publishing means giving a presentation. It's not just, you know, putting it out in a book or in a journal of some kind. And so we really want to make sure that faculty appreciate what that means. You know, there's also certainly things like conflict of interest that arise where the state ethics law has a carve-out for universities. Because universities have an economic development engine, and the expectation is that faculty are going to be part of that economic engine and do startups, which we want to support, and we do support. The state ethics law provides a carve-out for universities that's not allowed in other state jobs. And that carve-out basically allows us to work with and license and have agreements with companies where a state employee, a faculty member, has ownership interests. And that carve-out requires us to do something called a conflict of interest review to make sure that we can reduce, mitigate, or remove the potential conflict of interest. And that's where these conflict of interest management plans come into play.
Do federal employees have the same? If you're, for example, an NIH researcher on campus at NIH?
I think they do. Yeah, they have the same conflict of interest requirements that the university has. You know, they don't have to deal with the state ethics laws that we have, so their processes for managing it are probably a little bit different. I'm not really familiar with it, but I most certainly have the same type of thing.
Can you describe a little bit more about the conflict of interest management plan you mentioned for faculty and what this is for faculty? Because probably a few faculty that are watching this probably won't understand that process.
So conflicts of interest are, it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge, and what the plan basically outlines is how are we going to communicate? How are we going to make people aware that that relationship exists? That, you know, I'm in this lab, and the person I'm reporting to, the faculty member that runs the lab, has a startup company. So how do I know that what I'm working on is for the NIH or for the company, and where do I go for challenges if I feel like there's things that are wrong? And so what the plan does, it sets up those parameters, it sets up those guardrails, it sets up where and how you communicate to make sure that people are aware that the startup is there. You know, the worst thing that can happen is that, you know, there's a startup, there's you know, we used to call it the Sun paper test, right? If it comes out in the Sun paper, we want to make sure that we've looked at it and
we try and avoid that at UMBC.
We want to avoid that at all costs, unless it's a positive thing, of course. But, you know, now we're getting into some really heavy-duty external commitment challenges now as well. And so the federal government has, as a result of some of the challenges that were arisen with NIH and the FBI, where they found that faculty were not disclosing their external commitments and their external relationships, in particular with foreign countries, that, you know, they had cases where a faculty member was doing the same thing in their lab at the university that they were doing for XYZ government in another lab. And so these kinds of things, or faculty who were getting paid $50,000 a month from and not disclosing it. These kind of things have created, under the CHIPS and Science Act and the National Presidential Memorandum 33, a requirement now for full disclosure of your external commitments, and that includes both financial and non-financial, as well as gifts and those types of things. And so anything that you're doing now, you're going to have NIH, NSF, DoD, all of them are requiring those certifications of external commitment disclosure. So it's only getting more complicated in my opinion.
I would say we've been doing it as faculty for about 10 years. I think it's probably how long I've been doing this in terms of this type of level. It is very personal, a lot of the information that's required. And my advice to faculty that ask me about it, about disclosure, is disclose everything,
Yep.
right? Disclose it on time, and just get used to living with it, because it is personal, and certainly all the paperwork I have to put in sometimes is pretty tough, right? Because it's not just me, it's my wife, my family, and other people around me.
Yep.
But what I would say to faculty, and I hope you agree with this, is that these conflict of interest management plans, these conflict of interest assessments, the conflict of commitment, what I want to talk to you about in a second about what that all means, it's very important, because it actually safeguards the faculty member from downstream complications. It safeguards the students that are around the faculty member to make sure you're not got some sort of mill or some business running out of your laboratory.
Yeah.
It safeguards the institution and the funding agencies from discrepancies. So all around, as egregious as it is filling in this paperwork for faculty, and I certainly find that myself, I think it's very important for it to be there.
I think it's important as well. I'd love to be able to find ways to make it more efficient, and we have a template COI plan that is public, that you know. So we try to create that awareness, and certainly, you know, presenting this at things like the Startup Roundtable and those types of things, and meeting with faculty who have these. You're trying to make it as, and we also, when we do a management plan, gosh, I remember Yoni's, and we're working on one now for Dr. Vanderlei Martins. We want to work with the faculty to make sure that it's understood. That, you know, you're not just putting out something there that is boilerplate language. This is what it is. Here, sign it and go. You need to understand what it's saying, and you need to appreciate the requirements that are there in order to for it to be a successful plan. Because the concept is not just you draft it and it's done. This is part of what you need to do every day.
The plans are intrusive. They really are.
Oh, they are.
They are intrusive. There's no other word for it than intrusive, right? But again, I think the key, I think they're very important. What I really like what you said there is you talked about an understanding of the plan. I have talked to many faculty over the years that have asked me about management plans, because I think I had my first management plan way back in UMBI.
Yeah, I think it was UMBI.
About 18, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And that was intrusive as well. You're probably the person that actually probably did that one many years.
I probably
did
yes.
that one many years ago. They are intrusive, and I think the faculty understanding the plan, I think, is key. And what I've seen in a lot of faculty, not all faculty, but a lot of faculty I've spoken to, there is an urgency of, let's just get over, you know, we'll get the paperwork done, whatever it says, we'll move on, because there is an urgency for them just to have a company. It's the first company, they're excited about it, they're excited about the prospect with it. And so they charge through the process, and not realizing and understanding a lot of that paperwork makes them come, in my opinion, become undone downstream.
Yeah.
And it's a problem for faculty, I think.
Yeah, we're implementing something along those lines now. It's called post-approval monitoring, and our goal here is to do just that. Is really, you know, on a regular basis to try to follow up on. We have, it's more than just conflict of interest management plans. We have technology control plans. We have IRB. So you have human subjects protocols, animal research protocols, biosafety protocols. So all of these documents and these agreements that you put together, it's like a proposal or an award. You know, you have to abide by what those are. And often what happens is that, you know, we throw these things out there and then they're just left off the table, right? And nobody looks at them again. So we've put some resources in our compliance office, and our goal is to initiate some post-approval monitoring where we actually reach out to the faculty and say, how's it going? How's it going? Yeah. Novel concept. Yeah. But it's an important one.
I think it is an important one to follow up, just to make sure everything as it was. And, you know, a management plan that was written 10 years ago, things are propagated. Things have changed.
Exactly.
The company, the technology's changed. There may be new IP, maybe new people working on it, etc., etc. It all needs to be updated, looked at, and it needs to be a continuous process, in my opinion, to make sure it's managed effectively.
And those management plans, they're signed by the president. Your chair and your dean sign them. They go to University System of Maryland, and they go to the State Ethics Board. And so these are plans that are. It's not just within the lab or within UMBC. They're out there.
And I think the more that your office informs faculty just where these are going, who's looking at them, and they are at the ethics board, these plans, I think that they would probably understand the magnitude of what it is. Because I don't think faculty really understand the magnitude of the management plans, what they're really agreeing to, and what the guidelines within those four walls of that paper are. It's on that document. It's a very serious document that has to be adhered to.
And I think faculty, in some parts of it, they're used to. Certainly when you do an NIH proposal, or you disclose if there's company involvement in that, but it's broader than that. And so you're absolutely correct on that point.
I want to talk about something now that you alluded to a few minutes ago, which is conflict of commitment, and how that relates in a management plan, but start off by just describing to everybody what a conflict of commitment is.
Yeah, so external commitment, there's USM policy, and external commitment involves disclosure of what your outside commitment is. Now, the University System of Maryland allows faculty to have external commitment, have external relationships outside of the university. Those external commitments are often could be consulting, could be advising, could be collaborating on a paper, could be doing other societal benefits, things to benefit society. What we need to do within the university is right now what's happening is that external commitment documentation is submitted through the university in a PDF form. And so what we're looking at is trying to figure out a way, and this is the way the federal government is going. Our sister campuses, College Park, is in the process of implementing it. Is we're going to have this external commitment disclosure as part of our conflict of interest disclosure within Kowali. That's the game plan.
Yeah.
And so, the concept there is it's just like conflict of interest. It's disclosure. Disclose these things so that we can help you. And now with undue foreign influence and things like malign foreign talent recruitment programs and the things that are causing those issues, we want to be able to help faculty steer clear of those challenges that may arise in that area. So, for example, there was a faculty member at a major university who was on the board for a Chinese organization, and that, I think it was an ONR or Navy proposal, they basically came back and said, no, you're too high of a security risk because of this relationship. And so those relationships need to be identified, and if the university had looked at that prior, and I'm sure we'll get better at this as as the federal government defines this, and as we come up with how we're going to manage these. But if the university had known about that relationship, they probably could have advised the faculty member that, DoD agencies are now reviewing for security purposes. You really need to make sure and think twice about this particular relationship.
How do we advise faculty? How do we get faculty more familiar with some of these challenges that we face?
We've done a lot of outreach on foreign relationships. There's certainly a lot of things out there on malign foreign talent recruitment programs, which was a big issue, mainly out of China, but that's not country specific in any way. We use the Research and Creative Achievement Council. We use our websites. We use my UMBC outreach. We bring this up at the Startup Roundtable. There's a lot of different ways that we communicate this out. But right now, our goal is to try to get a system in place so that we can start recognizing where these relationships are and helping and guiding our faculty on how best to manage those relationships in lieu of what's going on with the federal government. And we certainly don't want to be in a position where you spend countless hours putting together a proposal and have that proposal decline because you're on some board because of some relationship you had with a faculty over in some country.
Now, in the conflict of commitment paperwork that I sign as a faculty member at UMBC, it only refers to consultancies and the hours that I've put, and I think we do it every quarter. It's a paper-based...
every 6 months.
6 months. It's a paper-based form that we fill in, and how many hours you consulted for A, B, C, or expert witness for how long you did this, etc. But there isn't anything on what you just mentioned, though.
You know, it's really interesting. You know, I brought this up, and we are working on it. I think a lot of faculty have that interpretation as well, is that it's strictly a consulting report. As a matter of fact, I think it's many times referred to as a consulting report.
It is.
But if you look at the policy actually outlines paid and unpaid relationships. And so it really involves any external relationship that you have. And we'll get into that. As we develop the system to capture this information, we'll do more outreach and provide more clarity on exactly what should be disclosed.
Now, by boards, you mean commercial board of directors, profit, non-profit. You don't mean editorial boards for publishing and things like that.
I don't think editorial boards, but I don't say it's just industry or profits or non-profits. It could be a university, and you're on the board for, you know, a Chinese university that's now on the restricted party list, and you know that's going to be a challenge and that's going to be a concern because of that relationship. And so the federal guidelines are coming out, but the way the legislation has come out, it really hasn't trickled down and really been clarified. Some of the agencies like DOD have some stuff out, but it really, NSF and their new PAPPG guide for 2024 has some clarity on it. But there really needs to be some more additional clarity on what exactly is and what isn't an issue as far as external relationships. I think anything dealing with a foreign entity, you should come to the compliance office, and the faculty should come to us and say, all right, I've got this relationship with this foreign entity. Is this a problem? We were just meeting with a faculty member, Dong Lee, who is coming to UMBC, and he's working with somebody in China on a paper, and so we talked to him about that, and so having those conversations so that we can understand what those relationships are and then apply it against the regulations as best we understand at this point is the services that we provide to help faculty navigate through this.
How do we educate faculty on all these complexities that we've been talking about, beyond Kuali, beyond emails that go through the system, etc.? Do you think there needs to be some course taken by faculty that's every couple of years, every 3 years, 4 years? For example, safety. Even as a full professor, I have to take mandatory safety training every 2 years. And I think it's a great idea. Why? Because safety policy changes.
Yep.
And I have a lot of young people in my lab, and I want to make sure that I'm ticking all the right boxes and I understand current safety. I think for all of these, the world is a very changing place. These complexities that we have with foreign governments are, in my opinion, only going to get more complex, certainly for the next few years. They're going to get worse before they get better.
Yes.
I think we need to have a level of training at UMBC that allows faculty to be exposed to some of these.
We're working on that.
No, I didn't know that, so I've second-guessed.
Yeah, no, so UMBC was actually, it's something that I started on when I first came to UMBC in 2010, was what's called the PI eligibility policy. And as a result of that, we were, I think, one of the few universities that actually review faculty for PI eligibility. PI eligibility means, being a principal investigator means that you can lead a proposal and a project at UMBC. And there's a vetting process. There's a policy involved that we go through in order to approve someone to be a PI. With that process, there is a training. It's called PIRAT, Principal Investigator Research Administrative Training and Education. And PIRAT is a program that we have for faculty that is going to be incorporating some of the security stuff into that. We're actually looking at that right now because some faculty have taken it more than 4 years ago. So now we're looking at, okay, how do we renew that training requirement? and that's part of the process. Within as I mentioned, within SPM 33 and the CHIPS Act, there will be a requirement for security training. NSF has already had a few awards out to universities that have created some training in security areas, and although I understand it's really long, City has some security training with export control. Yeah, City has some, and so if, for example, you come to us with some technology that is export controlled in some way, and we have to put together what's called a technology control plan to manage and make sure that that technology is secured. You have to take City training in export control. So we're trying to, as those touch points are places where we're trying to get that training incorporated.
It happened to me. We had a Bill and Melinda Gates $1 million grant many years ago, and we were planning on doing a clinical trial in Pakistan, in Karachi, just north Karachi. You remember?
Yes, I do.
And we were building these portable thermometers. We had to build 2 of everything because everything was getting stolen. And we had the same problem. We were exporting lasers and sensitive technology into a country where there were export controls.
Yeah.
So we ran into that problem ourselves.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
I mean, who would think, right? I mean, we would think.
And you know, universities are open. They're meant to be open. And so, you know, we have multiple cultures on the UMBC campus. I think the last count, we had 30 or 40 students from Iran. And so, you know, we want to provide those students with the education, but we also need to make sure that we're abiding by federal regulations and protecting any technology that they shouldn't be exposed to. And so it's a challenge for universities, and but it's what we have to deal with.
How does a faculty member protect against foreign students that may have been recruited, not recruited in their laboratories doing research? We don't have any way of looking at that currently, do we? I mean, it's, I don't think we've had any issues at UMBC, but certainly in the newspapers there have been other universities where, you know, students have been, foreign students have been in universities, etc., just gathering information. How is an institution, we can't, we're open, right?
Yeah, you know, that's a real challenge for universities. I don't know that there's a real clear way to stop. It's kind of like, if somebody's going to want to be that type of person, or they're working, in a way that is subversive to the U.S. and the government and intellectual property that we protect, that we try to protect, I think is, I don't know how much you can really do to prevent that from happening at a university setting. What we try to do is collaborate in that area. We collaborate with the global office for when they issue visas. There's certain visa requirements that require an export control review. We try to advise department chairs. We came out with a new guidance on Iranian students on what they can and can't do. Certain countries are more embargoed and restricted than others, and so it becomes very complicated. There really isn't a way that you're going to stop everything.
Do you envisage that faculty security training will be through City, which I think is a very effective way of doing a lot of the tests that we have to do as faculty, whether it's IRBs, bloodborne pathogens, safety, whatever it may be? Do you see that as a route that UMBC will take?
I think training needs to be multifaceted. Everybody learns in different ways. And so what we've tried to do is set up a multifaceted approach. Self-paced learning, like City and Pirate, those types of things, with small, short quizzes just to test knowledge. But also outreach, like I said, through website and those types of things, meeting with faculty, all those different ways. Some faculty learn better from just a conversation. And so there's multiple ways that we try to create awareness and educate the faculty in these areas.
We've talked a lot about faculty, we've talked a lot about students. What about staff at UMBC? Are there any staff that have done entrepreneurial activities or want to do them? Or?
We did have a faculty member, a staff member who became a faculty member, and he had a startup. We don't see it a whole lot, but I think that's growing. We actually have through our growth in research and creative achievement, have done some outreach to non-traditional units on campus. So groups like facilities and groups like the Hilltop, who are mostly staff, and they've been submitting proposals, and so now they're starting to get into that realm of okay, now I've got this award from XYZ organization to do this, and this, and could there be possibly some intellectual property or commercial applications to some of what we're developing as part of that? I do see that that's going to grow at UMBC as we continue to expand what it means to be a PI. It's not just faculty.
That's great to hear that. Do we intend then as an institution to offer courses for staff members that want, in other words, offer the same resources that faculty have access to? Is that the plan?
Most definitely. Those courses like Pirate, we were actually looking at it the other day. There are probably 200 plus staff members that have taken Pirate just on their own. It's a resource that is available to them as well. There are other ways that we're reaching out to staff and trying to make sure that they have those same opportunities. And certainly if a staff member has a startup or something that they want to talk about, Dave Fink and Wendy are there to help, and Halal and the rest of the team.
Does UMBC, I forgot to ask this earlier when we were talking about conflict of commitment and of interest. Are UMBC's policies simply state and federal, or do we overlay anything on top of those policies ourselves?
No, from a conflict of interest standpoint and an external commitment standpoint, we try to follow the policies. And in some ways, it's made it a little bit more of a challenge because the federal government isn't consistent. And so,
really?
No. NIH has different requirements than NSF has.
Sarcasm.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Anyway, it's insane. And so we actually have two different conflicts of interest policy depending on whether you get PHS funds or non-PHS funds. And so it becomes a little bit of a challenge. And so sometimes you want to create policies that make it easier just to understand what the policy is and not have to worry about, okay, is this a NIH funding? Is it the $10,000 that I have? Just make it blanket across this board. And I think that's where a lot of universities are going.
To simplify it.
So I think there might be some nuances out of that. The external commitment policy actually deals with, it's a faculty policy in reality. It really is a faculty policy. And so, how do you deal with staff? And College Park, for example, has implemented the external commitment requirements, disclosure requirements for every employee. And so I think that's probably the direction I'd like to see UMBC go as well, where we require that disclosure of every employee, because those disclosures are going to come into play as we expand who a PI actually is in the university.
Yeah. So we talked earlier about ways that faculty potentially could become undone during entrepreneurial activities. Can you think of anything else that's really particularly important that you might want to advise faculty to think about at an early stage? For example, we talked about faculty rushing to publish when they're trying to protect IP. That's a critical one. I've seen that many times before.
That's certainly critical. I think, reaching out, if you think you've got something, one of the things that I'd like to see us do more of is the outreach. These are relationships, and they're relationships that we need to have with external industry, but they're relationships that we need to have with people like you in the labs. And so, one of the goals with the SiteMiner concept through the TEDCO MII program is for our offices to kind of come and meet with faculty, talk about their research, and think about and openly think about, what are the applications of that technology from a commercial perspective? Did you think about going in this direction instead of this direction? And so some of those things, and those outreach, so reach out as early as possible, understand, and those resources are there. The Office of Technology Development is there. Wendy Martin and her team reach out to them and provide provide them where you think you are, what your technology is, invite them to your lab. That's the kind of stuff I would recommend faculty do. It's kind of a push-pull. We're trying to do as much as we can to do the outreach, but we also appreciate the fact when faculty reach out and want to talk about it. I think the other thing, as we talk about international collaborations, be cautious of those right now. Those are the kind of things that can get you stuck in different ways. We're working right now on using artificial intelligence to draft our marketing pitches for our technology, which is really cool. We
have amazingly talented students on campus that can really help you guys with this stuff.
It's incredible, the student population. I'm so impressed. We're working with a few students on an NSF granted program that Dr. Mallinson was leading. One of those students that was a program to develop students in research administration, so kind of make them aware of the career in research administration. And we brought one of them into our compliance office.
There you go.
There were two students from UMBC. We had an opening. He's now working with us, and he's actually going to help us with that post-approval monitoring process that I mentioned earlier. So students are great.
I know people behind the cameras here are doing wonderful.
Yes, they are.
They're very talented. I want to talk to you as we kind of close this down finally here about something that's not on the scripted list that we have here of things to talk about, but it's about gifts. And while you were talking, it made me think of faculty receiving gifts and the policies at UMBC about that. And I'm actually going to tell you a little story that you'll remember about a gift a long time ago that's actually is in my book that's forthcoming. But what about gifts? Faculty receiving gifts, disclosure of gifts, and how those gifts have to be treated.
We work very closely with the Office of Institutional Advancement that handles the gifts. I think Linda had met with you. She's the new corporate relations person. Again, Village, right? We're collaborating with our resources internally. Those gifts may not be an issue. They may be an issue, and so making sure that they're disclosed, and that's part of this external commitment disclosure process. Gifts can get you into trouble, and I think it depends.
Well, how can they get you into trouble?
So let's say I get a gift, and it's for $50,000, and Chris, I'm the XYZ Foundation. I really like what you're doing. Here's $50,000. Do whatever you want with it. Done.
Put them in contact with you.
Put me in contact with you, exactly. Then you have gifts that are kind of a little bit restricted or may have some nuances to them, and that's where you kind of get into a little trouble. So let's say a gift comes in and they say, we want to give you a gift to do this research, and we want you to provide us with the output of that research.
Well, that's a sponsored program.
That's a sponsored program. It's not a gift. But industry kind of recognizes that they can get around F&A and the cost of actually doing the work by providing these gifts in some ways. And so you have to be careful about that. Let's say a gift is from Wuhan University, or Wuhan, the Chinese company that's now a restricted entity, right? And so, now you've got an issue with, you now have a partnership with an organization that the federal government.
I would hope most faculty would be sensible not to take that gift.
I would hope so. But, those are the kind of things that could cause challenges.
But there are gifts that are non-financial as well, that are also stumbling blocks as well.
Yes, I mean, if you've got a piece of equipment that's coming in, those kinds of gifts, if you're being paid to go participate in a conference and a presentation, often we've had a couple occasions where faculty have wanted to go to China for certain reasons, and we look at those relationships to make sure that there's not an issue there. And that's where the challenges arise. So, for example, Malign Foreign Talent Recruitment Program is a program that provides funding, and sometimes that type of program says you can't tell your university,
which is a red flag.
Which it should be a red flag.
Instantly,
it should be a red flag. And so, but not all faculty recognize that as a red flag. And so these are the kind of things where you could potentially get into issues. Well, for example, that one faculty I mentioned where they had an O&R proposal that was declined because they were on a board for a Chinese organization.
Yeah, I want to tell you a little story that's actually in the book. Karish, who's been helping me dictate the book and put the book together, will smile. He's over there. He'll smile when I tell the story. But many years ago, I had some patents returned to me. So I'm now the assignee. I own the patents, and I was negotiating with Dow Chemicals to take some of this technology, and they were very interested in turning the technology into detecting pathogens in food, and they have a whole division over in Pennsylvania. And so I was negotiating with these guys for a massive sum of money to take some patents off me. I mean, it was a really light. I'm not going to tell you how much it is. You'll have to read it in the book. But it was a scary number. And Karish is looking because he knows this number. And Dow had come down here many times with their lawyers and met me. We'd had dinner, etc. And they were very fancy lawyers, fancy suits, big watches. You get the idea, right? And they wanted to fly me up to Michigan, which is where Dow's head office is. Beautiful place in northern Michigan. They actually have their own village. I call it a village. They even have their own hotel where they put their own people. And they were flying me on the corporate jet. And the corporate jet goes out of a private airfield in Pennsylvania. And I'm about a week away from leaving, and I bumped into you. And I told you, next week I'm going on this big fancy jet. And you replied to me, Chris, you need to think about that, because that's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
It is.
And so where I'm going, everybody that's watching this, is that gifts do not have to be financial. They don't have to necessarily be from a foreign entity. They can be a gift in kind, like riding on a corporate jet.
Yep.
And you'll be pleased to know that Southwest work out just as well. And I finished up taking the Southwest flight up there, and I enjoyed my peanuts in the days where you actually got peanuts on an airplane. Yeah? You don't get peanuts anymore, but I got peanuts. But that's an example of a gift, and it's an example that I bumped into you. And who would think that would be classified as a gift and can get you into trouble?
Yeah, and look what's going on with the justices, the Supreme Court now. I mean, these guys are going through some pretty big challenges in some of the things that they've been accepting. Free travel and
absolutely
boat trips and all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be formalized in a letter or some type of way. And it can be non-monetary.
So what you're saying is, as we close this down, and I thank you very much for talking to me today.
No problem.
Is that probably one of the best pieces of advice that you can give faculty is reach out early, and if you don't know, just ask.
Yeah, we're here to help. We're here to help.
Dean Drake, UMBC, great to see you. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for inviting me here.
No problem. Thank you.
Very much appreciate it.